Okay, I'm now speaking with Hackley Woodford. I'm going to ask you the question, how did you receive your first name? What happened there?
Well, my mother is Bessie Agnes Hackley, and so she gave me her maiden name, which a lot of people have done. So I'm Hackley, and my middle name came from my father's middle name.
All right, let me ask you a couple of questions here. First of all, can you give me a little bit of insight into Don Hackley and his dad, Bert Hackley, because I never had a chance to know either one of them.
Oh, that's right. You're Don Hackley's son.
Grandson.
You're Don Hackley's grandson, yeah. Don was 14 years older than I. And he was a barber, and a hell of a nice guy. He always had a wad of money with him. Did you know that?
No.
Don would have $500 or $600 with him all the time. And in those days, that's a fortune. Compared with now, you know. Let's go back, that would be back about 50 years ago, or 60. He was always prepared. He also used to carry a pistol on occasions because he was carrying a lot of money home all the time. I think he had a license. I was surprised when I found that out from Don once. He's strict. He's a very, very nice guy, very strict, and real businessman. He was crazy about my mother, his aunt. Aunt Bessie, he would do anything for her. Now, his dad was Bert Hackley, was my mother's brother. My mother was older than Bert. You know, all the Hackleys were barbers, Bert and Don, Bert and William Hackley and Arthur. Arthur Hackley, not only was barber, but he was the gentleman dresser or whatnot in those days. That is, he was correct at all times. He was the baby of the family. Bert had, did you hear me tell about charisma? Okay. Bert was charisma with a C. Everybody knew Bert. Everybody was crazy about Bert. And likewise, Irenaeus, his father, is known to stop. The streetcar would stop in Kalamazoo at an off stop to pick up Bo Hackley or Irenaeus Jerome Hackley. All he had to do was wave his hand. He could be anywhere. Not at a stipulated stop. Now, that's how much the charisma Irenaeus had, and he pressed it on to Bert. And people just loved Bert Hackley. Women, men, but you don't know why. There was nothing show-off about him. It was just something subtle.
I mean, they weren't flamboyant men?
Bert was not flamboyant. He was very well dressed. He was quiet, reserved. But he had some kind of magnetism to him. It just drew people to him. And that's what I can tell you about that. They were all very clannish, you know. They stuck together. That's the Hackleys.
You know, and what I've read about not only the Hackley men, but people who are in that lineage, they all seem to be very strongly willed and strongly driven. Where did that come from? How did that come about?
Well, I think, you know, it wasn't long after slavery. I was born less than 50 years after slavery. I was born in 1914. Slavery was 49 years after slavery. And then my mother, born in 1877, father in 1878, and Irenaeus Hackley was born in 1837. They had to be that way to survive. They had to be that way. When you think that, I don't know if you ever thought of this, but after the Dred Scott decision, blacks, even though they had acquired property, could be taken as slaves. My grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, fought in the Civil War. My wife's great-grandfather and my grandfather were in the same company. Her folks went to Massachusetts after the Civil War. Mine stayed in Michigan. But you could have a farm, home, and a family, and if you were out someplace and you could be captured by these slave runners, you were a slave after the Dred Scott decision. Because the white man there was nothing that a black man had that a white man had to respect. So they had to be self-reliant. Of course, the Dred Scott decision was repealed later, as you know, and I think Taney was the the Chief Justice at that time, and he should be rotting in hell, if there is a hell, because he really set our country back as far as blacks are concerned. Now, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
But now, about your mom, was your mom driven the same way as they were?
My mom was a very wonderful woman, lady. She could get more out of a dollar than anybody. And she could really make a dollar go a long way. And she also was a singer. Beautiful soprano voice. And I may be repeating myself, but her aunt by marriage was Azalea Hackley. So when my mother finished high school, she was invited to become a protege of Azalea Hackley in Detroit. So my father said, you can go with her and become a singer, or you marry me and make our own music together. My father was a pianist and an organist. Used to check the organs around Kalamazoo when they installed them way back there. So we had I don't know if you know this, but we had the Woodford family musical. We had concerts like the Jacksons, but this was long before that. All of us played an instrument, and we entertained in churches all around the state of Michigan, and my father gave all the money to the church. But my mother was a singer, and she knew music, and she was driven by that. All the kids had private lessons in the instrument of our choice. Yeah.
Okay, one more thing here. You know, why do you think it's important that we come together like this? Because a lot of families, don't have reunions, and they're not as they don't have turnouts like this one here.
Well, this is when I was a kid, we used to have family reunions. Trav Hackley used to get them. He's the one who was killed by a runaway hit-and-run driver years, 1930. I used to go to these as a kid. Now, what happened with this one? My sister was Alwina Williams. Her mother, by the way, this young lady over there. And when she and her husband died, they left the place on the lake. Did you go out to Lake Michigan? I mean, Eagle Lake?
No, I didn't.
Well, the home they built on Eagle Lake, they left to the kids, and that's the seat of these family reunions. That's why it happens to be at Eagle Lake. But we get together because, number one, we like it. It's enjoyable. And then when we're all stretched out over the country, like Walter's from Cambridge, Mass. He's a professor at Harvard, Cambridge. I guess you know that, don't you? And then we have some from New York. There's some from all over. They come from all east and west. We come from California. We get together. We don't get a chance to say a whole lot to each other, but we're here. We know it, and it's a part of our lives.
Okay, hold on. There's one more question I'm curious about. What did you do with your children to make them so driven themselves to achieve?
Well, they got good educations. They were twins. And Peggy went to Sarah Lawrence in Columbia, Harvard in Columbia. John went to Harvard. After 2 years, he went to Yale Law School. After 2 degrees at Harvard, decided he didn't want to become a lawyer. He said, "You can't. There was no justice in the law." He's a writer, and they were just they had excellent educations. I think that's one thing.
So, as you look back over your many years, I don't know how old you are.
I'm 86.
You're 86.
I'm 86, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think today that a person, if they really put their mind to it, can achieve what they want?
I think so. Now, this is my wife right here. Now, Mary comes from a very distinguished family. She's the 4th generation Howard alumna. Her mother finished Howard, her grandfather and great-grandfather.
All from Howard?
Howard. And we had 2 daughters go to Howard, so that made the 5 generations of us. But Mary's father went to school in Massachusetts. And you ever hear of Chester Hairston?
Yes.
Well, he came to our house one day when Mary's dad was visiting us. Mary's in Massachusetts. And Chester Hairston and my father-in-law hadn't seen each other since they were 17, 18 years old. And man, they were talking to them. Man, you know how you used to be. And they went to University of Massachusetts together. But she has a very strong family and education. A lot of that is passed over on to my kids too.
Okay. And go ahead.
That's. Hope I don't sound braggadocio, but I'm just telling you the way it is. You know.
Okay. One last question I do have, and that's about Charles Hackley.
Chuck, we call him.
What can you share about him? Because apparently he had the option to maybe go to medical school, but he wanted to go into business for himself also.
I didn't know about Chuck in medical school. Now, let's see, what's the age difference between Chuck and Donna Jean? What's the age difference between Chuck and Donna Jean?
I don't want to say that on camera, but maybe a year or so. Whatever.
Well, Donna Jean's the oldest, isn't she? Is she older than Chuck?
I think.
I think so. Well, Chuck could have done anything he wanted to. He's a bright guy. He had a smart dad, but he had a very smart mother. Thelma Minor was a college woman, and she instilled that in those kids. Donna Jean was a great scholastic person. I think that maybe Chuck had that Hackley business gene in him, which seems to run through the Hackley family.
All right. Thank you.
There was Chuck, and then there's Art. Art worked for me for a while after he finished medical school in my office in Benton Harbor, but he would rather come to California and be a poor man than a rich man in Michigan. He used to say he loved California so much. And I came out here myself 30 years ago and found out he was right.
You know, but what was it about the men that made them want to have their own?
I don't know why they had their own thing. It's just maybe they got it from their forebears. But they felt that well, when you're your own boss, you know, you're just better off. You have a wider opportunity. John's ahead of his. John's the chief of his journalism group, University of Michigan. You know, he can come and go as he wishes, whatnot. Peggy does the same. Now, Mary was a school teacher. And, you know, we married at Howard. Did I tell you?
Yes.
We married at Howard 60 years ago. And she went to, in addition to Howard, went to the University of Chicago.
Well, hold it. Now, you weren't the one that, the same day that you got a degree.
Yeah, we married.
And she also got a degree on that same day?
Right.
Now, I need to turn the camera around just to see you. But how did you do that? I mean, how did you both get degrees and get a marriage on the same day?
Oh, we worked at it. I finished medicine. Okay. Mary finished undergrad. She's younger than I. See, I robbed the cradle. See? And her aunt helped. We had the
wedding breakfast at her house, where she lived in Washington, D.C.
See, graduation ceremony was at 5 o'clock in the evening. Things cooled down at Howard about that time of day, whereas we married in the morning, and we had a wedding breakfast. So we married, and then we went to Chicago, where we lived for a while I was in training. And
I do have one question for you. Now, you all have been married for 60 years?
Yes.
6 years ago, what was it about him that attracted you to him to where you wanted to marry him?
I thought that he had a wonderful personality and that he was serious about his career. And we enjoyed music together. He played the violin, and I enjoyed that. We enjoyed studying, and both of us would have liked to have children who were interested in education too.
So, you know, as you look back over these many years, you know, what key ingredients do you see that are important to make a group like this harmonious?
Honesty and sincerity, steadfastness, holding to your goals.
You have to respect each other. I tell people, when I'm out with a bunch of guys and they're talking about questions, how to do this, that, and the other, and said, listen to your wife. You go a long way if you listen to your wife. Women are different, you know, they're in my opinion, a step above us in many things, because when they mature, they become a different being. When a guy retires, he's a bigger boy. He's still having toys with all these things and sort of thing. Women are different. But I want to tell you, I became a doctor because of a Hackley. And the Hackley was my mother. And when I got in the 9th grade, I was taking Latin and I always wanted to become a doctor. So after dinner at night, my mother would do dishes and I'd wipe her. I just loved to do that. I loved to be around her in the kitchen. She knew a lot. So this particular time, I said to my mother, I don't think I'm going to become a doctor. I think I'll become a minister. And she said, why? And I said, well, the Latin's too hard. I can't get the Latin. And my mother was that much of a psychologist that she didn't say, look at me now, but she just began to quote Latin. And the faintest idea she knew anything about Latin. She just quoted Latin to me. And I finished the dishes, went upstairs, and it dawned on me that if my mother could do this and remember Latin after 35 years, maybe I could learn to do something. But she, in my case, I always told my kids, well, look what I could do. You know, I did this, you can do it. My mother didn't do that. She never said a word. But I changed right back and decided I didn't have to become a minister. Well, that's a true story.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mary's heard that story.
Oh, the knees. Oh.
I never knew that I'd meet Chuck Hackley's grandson. No, Chuck's son, Donald's grandson.
Yes.
You're Don's grandson.
Yes.
Right.
Because I was told that I was in my mother's arms at his funeral. I mean, you know, as an infant.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
then I saw you because at Don's funeral, I approached his kids and asked them if was there anything they needed. They could check with me. Or I know one wanted to study medicine. I don't think Art was in it yet. But I let him know that any financial thing he would need, I could get it. But Art didn't need anything from anybody. You know, he's self-sufficient.
You know, do you see him very much anymore?
Not much. It was always enjoyable when I did see him because we lived in Pasadena too, you know.
Okay.
And there was a time there when one particular girlfriend, we saw each other much more than we did. And whenever Thelma came out, of course, we would see him. But I'm going to call him when I get back because Donna Jean's going to give me his telephone numbers.
I want to ask you one thing about Art. I've only talked to him in person maybe a couple times, and anytime I was in his presence, we talked for a long time. And I do want to, spend more time with him and talk with him. But he, again, to me, marches to his own drum beat.
Yeah, he's an individual, hell of a tennis player. Did you know that? Oh, he was a crack tennis player in college. Crack tennis player. The first thing I saw when I walked in his office in Los Angeles, tennis racket and balls on his desk. And Art was a smart guy, and he knew how to get along with people. But he's a singular type of individual, but admirable.
So was he driven just like his dad and grandfather?
Yeah. Art found out that he could do just as well in business as he could in medicine, and I think he was more inclined to business.